Hello, my name is Rwaltr, and this is a presentation about how to use Hugo, GitLab, GitLab CI/CD, GitLab Pages, and Git to make a very easy to maintain, updatable website that is composed entirely of text and does not require any HTML knowledge to create. This presentation was originally intended for Texas Linux Fest 2020. Unfortunately, that event was canceled, and this presentation has been adopted into a video format for platforms such as YouTube and Library. Here are the tools you will need to get started. You will need to create an account at gitlab.com. You will need to have Git installed. You will also need to have Hugo installed. If you're running Fedora Linux, we will actually be installing these into a container ran by Toolbox, which we'll cover more in the video. This presentation is aimed at Linux users, but could be adopted to Windows users with the right type of commands and utilities installed. Let me go ahead and open up my browser and show you one of my projects. This is my personal start page that I use as a startup for all of my web browsers. This is a relatively simple website, although I do have a confession to make. I don't know HTML. This web page consists of really nice looking pictures and hyperlinks to other websites I use and a search bar for DuckDuckGo. What I did to generate this website is grab a specific theme off of themes.gohugo.io and then proceeded to use the theme to the instructions to provide the data necessary to generate this template. Another example website is a blog. One of my posts on my blog that has headers, subheaders, dates, authors, images, quotes, hyperlinks, unordered lists, as well as some other features we haven't shown, such as embedding other HTML aspects like a tweet, ordered lists, and code blocks. Actually, code blocks are here as flavor text. There's also tags and contact information on the bottom. We can see the theme is Beautiful Hugo. We will be covering how to use the Beautiful Hugo theme today, and what you will need to get started. Let's go ahead and find the theme that we are going to be using, which is Beautiful Hugo. Go ahead and go to themes.gohugo.io, and let's go ahead and do a search for Beautiful. Here it is, Beautiful Hugo. However, there are plenty of themes to choose from. Beautiful Hugo is the easiest to start with because it has very good documentation. Go ahead and keep this tab saved for now. We'll come back to this later. Let's go ahead and set up our local environment. If you're using Fedora Linux, you can follow these commands. Go ahead and open up a terminal and let's install a few programs that we can use. If you're using Fedora Linux, we will also be using a tool called Toolbox. Toolbox is a very cool application that creates transparent containers for you to use. So I'll go ahead and install this and I'll be back with you shortly. Now that Toolbox has been installed, we can go ahead and create a container by running toolbox enter. If you do not already have Toolbox container, it's going to ask you to create one automatically. Here, it looks like nothing new has changed. However, you'll see that my host name has been changed to Toolbox. We still have access to our home directory, but our system repositories and binaries are now encapsulated inside of this container. This allows you to install any amount of programs without modifying the base system, which could be very useful in an immutable system or if you don't have root access. Let's go ahead and install our other tools. We'll need to install Hugo and Git. Git is going to be our source code revision tool, and Hugo is going to be our site building tool. Now that Hugo has been installed, we can now use it to generate a skeleton for our website. Let's go ahead and do this by typing Hugo, new, site dot slash to reference the current directory. Hugo will now generate a skeleton of our project inside the current directory. Once that has been completed, we can go ahead and install our theme. Go ahead and go back to the web tab we had open earlier, and let's go ahead and look at the instructions. It asks us to run this git submodule command, but we don't have a git repository yet. Let's fix that. Go back to your terminal, and let's create a git repository by typing git init. This is going to create our empty git repository. Let's go ahead and add everything as it is using git add asterisk, and then git commit -m quote init commit quote to create our first commit with the message of init commit. Congratulations! We now have a local Git repository that holds our website. Let's go ahead and cd to the themes directory and then run that git submodule command from earlier. What is happening is that Git is adding a reference to an external repository by the theme's authors of the theme. This technically means that we have a Git repository inside of a Git repository in case you really like Git repositories. But the benefit of this is that as we're making changes to our own Git repository and the authors are updating their Git repository, our reference will not change, so we can update at our leisure. Let's go ahead and do a git status and see how Git views this. We've added a new file called git attributes that stores the git submodule state, and we also see that our new folder looks like a file. Let's go back to our main directory, do our git add command, and then we'll do a git commit with a message of, something like adding a theme. We now have our theme committed. Awesome. However, we probably don't have everything we need to run that theme yet. Luckily, this theme does include an example website we can use. Let's go ahead and do cp-r into themes, beautiful Hugo, example sites to our current directory. We see that Git now says some of our stuff has changed. I've made a mistake. I copied the folder itself instead of the contents of the folder. Instead, you should be using /* at the end to copy only the contents. Now we see that we have tons of changes in our repository that we need to commit. Let's go ahead and do a git add and then git commit for our new example template of our website. We have now applied our example website. You may be wondering, how can you preview this website? Let me go ahead and show you. Go ahead and open up your web browser in your terminal, and let's run Hugo server. Hugo server has referenced that we now have a web server being hosted at localhost :1313. Let's go ahead and open up this in our web browser. Here, we see that we now have the example website being hosted directly on our desktop. We can then use this to build content and view it as it's being edited. Congratulations! We now have a basic website that you have stored on your desktop to test and preview. Let's go ahead and push this out to our GitLab repository, and then we'll go ahead and do the custom stuff after. Let's go ahead and push this website to GitLab. Make sure that your GitLab account is set up and that your SSH key has been pushed. You could also use HTTPS. I prefer SSH because it's more performant for me usually. Once your SSH key has been uploaded, let's go ahead and push our contents. Normally, you do this by going to the GitLab website and then clicking the new project button. However, that isn't exactly required. What we can do instead is do a git push -u for new upstream, then gitlab.com. Oh, I'm sorry. If you haven't had anything special configured, it'd be git@gitlab.com your username / your project name .git. You also have to reference your branch, which defaults to master. GitLab will tell you the command to add it as your new origin, but we've already done this with the -u option, as well as the URL we can then put into our web browser. This is the brand new repository we created on GitLab, but we didn't have to do anything special with the website to do so. However, in order to make this a public website, there's a few extra things we will need to do. Let's go ahead and add in the CI/CD pipeline that we'll need. You should see a button that says CI/CD. Go ahead and click it. Let's go ahead and apply the Hugo template that GitLab has already created for us. We're going to briefly cover what this file is doing for us. What this file is doing is referencing a container from GitLab, specifically for the pages functionality, but it's called Hugo, and it's the latest version of that container. We're also setting a variable called getSubmoduleStrategy recursive. This just means that we're pulling everything down from our submodules, which would be our theme. We then have our test. Our test is to run Hugo except when it's master. What this means is that on all branches that are not master, we're just going to run the Hugo command, and if it returns successfully, that means our test is also successful as well. Pages is going to run the script Hugo and grab the artifacts of the public folder and then run only on master. Meaning that whenever the master branch gets updated, it's going to run the Hugo command and then take the files inside the /public directory, which Hugo creates, and then upload it to GitLab pages. Let's go ahead and commit this change that we're doing through GitLab's interface to our repository. Now that the file has been created, there are a few other things we'll need to do. Go ahead and go to Settings and General. Under the Visibility tab, you'll need to go down to the Pages section and then change it to Everyone. By default, it's only project members, which is good if you have private content, but the downside is they require a GitLab account. Go ahead and save your changes here. Let's go ahead and move to Settings, Pages. We're going to force HTTPS, and then it tells us what page we're serving it under. HTTPS blackfedora.gitlab.io. Essentially, this will be HTTPS, your username, .gitlab.io / your project name. If you have your own domain and you would prefer to use that, click up here on the domain button, and what will happen is GitLab will ask you for the domain, say for example, hugotest.rwaltr.tech, and if you want a certificate automatically generated. I highly suggest this unless you know why you can't. It will then generate the domain reference, a bind compatible DNS entry, and a bind compatible TXT entry for verification. You will need to adopt these if you're using a different DNS service. However, essentially, we are creating a TXT entry with this content, which is essentially a code GitLab uses to verify that we actually own this domain. If you have a domain that you don't want to use anymore, you can use the Remove Domain button. Do note that it will need to be verified before it's responsive for that domain. Let's go ahead and get the content going. We're going to go ahead and pull our changes back to our desktop using git pull. We can now see that we have the .gitlab-ci file. At this point, your new website might actually already be generated. Sometimes, as the website's being building, the functionality may seem odd, But there's actually a very specific reason that this is failing, which I'm going to show you how to fix. Let's go ahead and open up our config.toml file. Here we see that there's the base URL parameter. Let's go ahead and change it. Cool tip, if you type in CI and then quote, it will then tell Vim to change everything inside of the quotes. Let's go ahead and put in our new base URL, which is right here. There we go. Let's go ahead and see if this actually fixes our formatting issues. We'll go ahead and write, add all our changes, and then push it out. Now that it has been pushed, we can reference the CI/CD section of our GitLab website to see that we now have a new job that is running. We can check the status of this job in the terminal output. Right now, the Docker container is initializing. All right, the command has finished and our content is now being pushed. We can see this by looking at the paths and referencing the website. Fantastic! The formatting has been fixed. Let's go ahead and make a few other changes to our config file and its contents. Let's go ahead and do some basic things that make this website more like our website and less like an example. We'll do this by editing the config by toml file here. We can go ahead and set the title. Let's set this to Hugo test. This line is referencing the Hugo theme and shouldn't be edited unless you want to change the theme. We're not going to be using this thing here, so we're going to go ahead and delete the next 4 lines. Next are some special parameters we can use, such as subtitles, main section, logos, favicons, date formats, and others. The things that you probably should want to edit are things like your subtitles. You can have the RSS feeds generated for you. You can also have comments, reading times, word counts, and some other really cool metadata type stuff that this theme provides for you. We can go ahead and change the author section, which changes all of our content that's been generated at the bottom of the page. That's used kind of like a contact us session where we can reference the different types of sites we're at. And then I'm going to go ahead and just delete the rest of this here. Next, we have what's called the main menu tags. In this theme, the main menu tags generate the stuff at the top right of our website. So for example, blog and the URL references. So say for example, you want to reference another website. The way you can do this is by adding in some brackets. Other things we can edit are tags and how much or reference specific URLs besides your content. But that is how you reference the main aspects of your website. Let's go ahead and push this out to our GitLab repository. Let's go ahead and reference the new job being created, and we will wait a few moments for it to finish. Our website has finished generating. Let's go ahead and see if we can view our new changes live. Ah, wonderful! Hugo test. My test Hugo website, along with a link to DuckDuckGo. Let's see if it works correctly. Wonderful. Let's go ahead and edit the content of the website instead of the general parameters. Inside our local repository, after fixing local issues, we can see that we have the content directory. Let's go ahead and check what's in that. Here we have underscore index, page, and post. The underscore index is for adding what's called these boxes. These are where you can put like general notes about a certain page. I don't really use them, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this file. Let's go ahead and check out the post folder. Here we see multiple posts organized by date and a general title. Do note that Hugo doesn't really care about the title but it is used to generate the URL of your web page. And if you want some sort of structure to that, name your files accordingly. Let's go ahead and check out some of the contents of one of these files. Very simple. At the beginning of the file, we have a YAML pretext, which provides Hugo with some basic information, and then the content of the web page. Let's go ahead and reference a different section or post. How about flake it till you make it? Here we see that this is a much larger file and that it has a more information inside the YAML pretext. Title, subtitle, date, and big image, which is a special part of this theme that I'll leave for you to look into. We will go ahead and make our own Hello World post. Let's go ahead and get rid of all of the other stuff in here so that it is only our own content. And then we'll go ahead and create our own file. Go ahead and put in 3 dashes. And let's go ahead and create a title called Hello World, a subtitle, Hello Subworld, a date. This is going to tell Hugo what date you submitted this content. Today is 2020-05-24. Do note that it does need to be in ISO format. A few other extra things we can add, but I will not reference now. Not Google Push, but publish date. This will tell Hugo when your website should actually be displayed. We'll go into this later. This tell Hugo whether this is a draft file and will refuse to publish it as long as this flag is true. This will tell Hugo when to remove this content from the website. We'll go into this later. And then one last one. Let's say you have more than one author on your website. You can then reference that author here, and they will also have their own tags and author tags. Let's go ahead and create our basic hello world, we'll create a level 1 header. Hello world. We'll create a second level header. Second world. Third level header. Third world. And so on. This is how you create headers in your document. Let's go ahead and do some other types of text. If you have noticed already, we are using Markdown as our main formatting for the web pages. When you're using Markdown, there are some special rules you'll need to know. For example, this is a paragraph. This is a paragraph. These will actually appear as the same line. Actually, no, I'm sorry. You may think these are two separate paragraphs, but Markdown interprets these as the same paragraph. This is so that you can separate your thoughts out as sentences instead of an entire paragraph. And if you want to separate a new paragraph, you'll need two new lines. That is, a new line at the end of your first sentence, and then another new line right after that. And now it's a new paragraph. We can also perform some simple formatting, such as hello world. We want world to be italicized, and then hello to be bolded. We now have italicize and bold. And then we also can do that all at the same time. There's a few other things we can do, such as a strikeout. Not everything supports this, but most do. We can also do some code. If you do a backtick, which on US keyboards is usually the key above the tab, and then type in some code like if awesome equal true, this will be formatted in monospace, which is generally preferred for code. You can reference an entire block of code by putting in 3 backticks like this, and then 3 backticks at the bottom, and then if awesome equal true, then echo. This is cool. So with these larger code blocks, you can also reference the language you're using, such as Bash or Python. This will change the syntax highlighting to adjust for that language. Note that the syntax highlighting you're seeing now is a function of NeoVim and the plugins I have installed for it. We will see the highlighting on the website as well. Let's go ahead and write out the file, add all of our changes, and push it to our GitLab repository. I will come back once it is finished. Our new post has been updated. We can see that it was posted on May 24th. Its time is 1 minute, 35 words, and created by me. Let's go ahead and go to this post, and we can see our first, second, third, fourth, and so on headers, how things are separated, special syntaxing, code blocks, as well as a code block with specific highlighting. There's a lot else you can do in Markdown format, and what you can do also is kind of dependent on what theme you're using. However, it is quite expansive, and covering everything would probably take too long for this video. Congratulations! You have built a very basic website that you can now share with the world. You also will notice that this website did not actually cost you anything financially. GitLab's Pages feature is free, as well as the content is static, which is what we use Hugo to generate. If you have any questions, feel free to comment them below, and you have a good day. Hey everybody, thank you for listening in. This was my first long-form Linux presentation, and it wasn't easy to make. I originally started making this presentation at least 4 months ago, and along the way had to relearn everything from video design to working with the audio equipment I had available to me. So thank you.